Welcome back to the deep dive. Usually when we begin, we're faced with this formidable mountain of source material.
Right. Stacks of reports, data, academic papers,
Yeah.
things we have to synthesize and, categorize for hours.
Exactly. We spend most of our time trying to make the complicated simple.
But today we're doing something fundamentally different. The material we have in front of us for this deep dive is uh, startlingly concise.
It really is. It's not a 300-page academic text or some sprawling philosophical treatise.
Not at all. We have a set of core principles, a poem, a Koan, and then a few practical notes, and all of them are incredibly brief, very direct, very simple.
Right. So this isn't about sorting through complexity. It's really about extracting profound wisdom from a kind of radical simplicity. Our mission today is to treat this short text like a highly concentrated essence,
Yeah.
a powerful navigational tool,
Mm.
and to fully unpack the deep, actionable insights that are packed into its really precise language.
It feels like it promises a kind of shortcut. A shortcut to understanding a pretty fundamental truth about perception, about identity.
I think so.
Yeah.
And because the material is so concentrated, so potent, we're going to take a very unhurried pace, almost a meditative one.
We have to. We need to allow space for these foundational concepts to really land, to settle.
So that you, the listener,
Yeah.
can absorb the subtle but, ultimately liberating distinctions that are presented here.
Yeah, we are definitely not rushing to the finish line on this one. It's more about resting in the recognition of what is already true.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start at the very foundation, which is this distinction between the seer and the seen.
This is the absolute core. It's the structural concept that everything else in the text is built on.
So we're just going to jump right into the section labeled core.
I'll read the entire core text now. And
Yeah.
as I do, just listen for the immediate and absolute dichotomy it establishes. What changes is seen. What sees does not change. Forgetting is taking what is seen to be the seer. Remembering is seeing that mistake. Suffering comes from the mistake. Clarity comes when it falls away. Nothing is added. Nothing is achieved. Only confusion ends. You can check this now. Something appears. You know it. You are the knowing, not what appears. That is all.
Wow. It's incredibly stark. And efficient.
It is. There's no fat on it at all.
The entire definition of reality here is just boiled down to two absolute categories. On one side, you have everything that appears, that moves, that evolves or fluctuates or disappears.
Whole content of experience.
Yes, and that is defined simply as the seen.
And then on the other side, you have the seer, which is defined entirely by what it is not. It's the capacity, this unwavering awareness itself.
The text just says what sees does not change.
And that one line immediately separates our foundational awareness from the endless flux of personal experience. It's the constancy behind all of the variability.
So for you listening, this means literally everything you can point to or name or feel or think about. It all gets categorized as seen.
Everything.
Your body. That's seen. Your thoughts about next week's meeting. Seen. Your deepest political opinion, your sense of success, the trauma you carry, that beautiful memory from childhood.
All of it. All of it is content that is seen by something else.
Yes, and I think what's often missed, and what the text implies, is that the seer isn't just the eye that sees a physical object.
No, not at all. It's the awareness that knows a thought, that knows a feeling or a sensation. If you feel a surge of joy, that joy is the content, it's the scene,
Man.
but the capacity to register that joy, to know joy is here, that's the awareness, that's the seer.
Or if you suddenly remember a task you forgot to do, the thought itself, oh, I need to buy milk, that's the content, it's seen.
And the capacity to know that the thought arose, that's the seer. It was there before the thought, and it's there after the thought passes.
And here's where the text immediately goes right to the heart of human experience. It defines the mechanism of suffering in the simplest possible terms I think I've ever heard.
Forgetting is taking what is seen to be the seer.
That is a massive concept distilled into just a few words. It's the whole ball game right there.
It is the critical insight that drives this entire deep dive. This mistake is a fundamental error in identification, a case of mistaken identity.
We take the ephemeral content, the anxiety, the professional title, the relationship status, and we assign our core identity, the seer, to that changeable object.
When we forget this core distinction, we're essentially saying, I'm this cloud, instead of remembering I am the sky in which the cloud appears.
So if I lose my job, The suffering isn't just about losing income or stability.
Mm-hmm.
The real sting, according to this, is that I feel like I have failed.
Because you mistook your job title, a piece of scene content, for the core, unchanging me. And I mean, the modern world is practically structured to make us do this, to exacerbate this mistake. We're constantly encouraged to define ourselves by our achievements, our external metrics, our social standing.
All things which are inherently unstable.
They're all wind. They're all content that must, by its very nature, change over time. And when those things change, which they always do, we experience this inevitable suffering that's rooted in our attachment to the ephemeral.
The core text is so clear. Suffering comes from the mistake. It's not caused by the content, the job loss, but by the confusion.
The confusion of identifying with the job loss.
I can see a listener pushing back on this, though. I mean, we are required to have an identity for practical living. We need to be able to say, I am a parent or I am an engineer.
Of course.
So isn't this idea of an unaffected awareness a bit passive or cold, even? How do we reconcile the necessity of having an identity with this ultimate teaching that identity is only seen content?
That's a really crucial distinction to make. The practical identity parent, engineer, friend, political advocate, that is content, yes, but it's necessary content for navigating the world. The text isn't demanding you eliminate those roles.
It's not about becoming a blank slate.
Not at all. It's simply pointing out that those roles are known. The seer is the capacity that knows the parent role, that knows the engineer role, that knows the friend role.
So the awareness isn't passive, it's just foundational.
Exactly. It's highly active in the sense that it registers every single thing, but it's passive in the sense that it doesn't become the thing it registers.
Can you give an analogy for that?
Sure. Think of a computer screen. The screen displays the movie, the action, the drama, the comedy, but the screen itself isn't damaged by the violence on it or made permanently happy by the comedy.
Okay. It remains the unaffected capacity for the display.
Yes. And the moment you realize that about your own awareness, the emotional stakes around the scene content, they just drop, which paradoxically allows you to engage with the content, with your life more effectively, without the constant drag of fundamental self-doubt.
That makes a lot of sense. So the resolution then is purely perceptual. It's not about achieving a new state. It's about remembering is seeing that mistake.
Precisely. This remembering is the aha moment that, you're looking for as a listener. It's the moment the mind stops struggling to reconcile the conflict between the changing content and this idea of a stable self.
Because it realizes the stable self was the capacity all along.
Exactly. You don't have to practice remembering. You don't have to strive for it. You simply recognize the confusion that was obscuring it.
And once that recognition happens, the mechanism for achieving clarity is described in these strikingly simple, subtractive terms. Clarity comes when it falls away. It sounds like an unburdening.
It is fundamentally subtractive. If confusion is the only problem, then the end of confusion is the only solution needed.
It requires no complex intellectual scaffolding, no new belief system.
And certainly no arduous striving. The text is insistent on this point. Nothing is added. Nothing is achieved. Only confusion ends.
I think this is a point we really need to dwell on for a moment because it flies in the face of so much contemporary spiritual or self-improvement seeking.
It really does.
That whole world is built on the idea of acquisition, gaining more knowledge, achieving a better self, adding positive habits.
Right. The better version of me project.
Yes. And if I spend my life striving to become a more enlightened person, I am still operating entirely within the field of the scene. I'm just polishing the content.
That is absolutely correct. Any pursuit that relies on adding something, a skill, a title, a feeling, even a transcendent experience, is rooted in the mistaken assumption that the seer is somehow incomplete and needs fixing or upgrading.
And this text is just a radical denial of that whole premise.
Completely. The awareness itself, the seer, is already complete and present. You don't need to earn it or build it up. Any concept of an improved me is just another thought, another piece of content that the unchanging seer is registering.
The efficiency of this is just breathtaking. It bypasses the entire cycle of striving and attachment.
Because the only thing that was ever causing suffering in the first place was the confusion. It was the mistaken belief that the content defines the container.
So when you recognize that, the seeking effort just stops.
It has to. And clarity naturally rushes into the space that's left by the absence of confusion. It's like turning off a fog machine in a room. The clarity, the clear space was there all along, just obscured.
So let's bring this back to immediate experience. For the listener trying to grasp this kind of abstract distinction, the source material offers an immediate self-check, a way to verify this truth right now.
Yes, the practical test. You can check this now. Something appears. You know it. You are the knowing, not what appears.
Let's make this tangible. Let's walk through some examples.
Okay, let's start with a physical sensation. Perhaps you notice a dull ache in your back from sitting too long. Or maybe it's just the feeling of your clothes against your skin.
Okay, got it.
The physical sensation, the ache or the contact, that is the thing that appears. That is the scene.
And the simple act of registering that sensation, the fact that, my back aches or I know I am breathing, that capacity to register the content.
That's it. That is the seer. That is the knowing.
Okay, now let's apply it to mental activity. Thoughts.
All right. You have a constant internal monologue, a voice narrating, judging, planning. That voice is content that appears. You don't have to exert any effort to know the voice is there. It is simply known.
And so the question becomes, who is the knower?
And the answer from the text is, you are the knowing, not the voice itself. Even if that voice is saying, I am a failure, the knowing capacity registers that statement neutrally without being fundamentally changed or damaged by the self-judgment.
Okay, and finally, let's use an emotion, because that tends to be the most overwhelming and convincing form of seen content.
A great example. Imagine a sudden jolt of frustration or anger. It appears very intensely.
And the old mistake is to identify with it immediately. I am frustrated.
Yes, that's the confusion. The recognition, the self-check is realizing frustration is being known. I am the knowing that registers this phenomenon of frustration.
And the frustration is highly unstable. It will soon pass. But the capacity to know it will remain, ready to register the next sensation or thought.
The instruction is just that simple. It's to shift your attention and your sense of identity from the ephemeral content, the passing thought, the feeling, the sensation, to the constant capacity that knows it.
And if you can perform that simple shift, even for just a moment, you've verified the entire core text.
You've seen that you are the consistency behind all the variability, and that's why the text can ultimately simplify everything down to that final conclusion. That is all.
Because there's nothing more complex to realize.
There isn't.
That clarity brings us beautifully into the next section of the material, which shifts the language from that direct prose into a more poetic expression.
Yes, the power of metaphor. It allows us to feel or experience the distinction between the unchanging and the changing in a more visceral way.
So this next section is titled Poem.
It uses these very simple natural metaphors to reinforce the foundational concepts we've just been discussing.
Let's hear it.
What moves is seen. What sees does not move. The wind passes. The sky remains. A thought arises. Knowing is already here. Nothing was lost. Nothing is gained. Only the hand opens.
The first stanza is just an immediate, beautiful, and, well, an undeniable restatement of the core truth. What moves is seen. What sees does not move.
It's the same principle, just painted with a different brush.
And the wind and sky analogy is, it's arguably the most powerful image in the entire source material. It just perfectly captures the relationship between the ephemeral content and the constant awareness.
It really does. The wind, which is constantly shifting, changing velocity, sometimes it's violent, sometimes it's gentle, that is the scene.
It represents our temporary fluctuating experiences, our emotions, our thoughts.
And the crucial point, of course, is that the wind passes. It has no permanence. It cannot be held.
And conversely, the sky is the perfect analogy for the seer. What sees does not move.
The sky is the container. It's the unchanging backdrop for all movement. When a hurricane rips through a town, the wind is moving violently. Houses might be destroyed on the ground, but the sky itself? The sky remains the same vast, unaffected space.
It provides the context.
Yes.
But it's fundamentally untouched by the phenomena that occur within it.
Yes.
This analogy solves a very common mental trap. We so often try to stop the wind.
You do.
We try to force ourselves to stop feeling anxious or to stop thinking negative thoughts. But the text here suggests you can't stop the wind. The wind is simply what happens in the field of the scene.
Exactly. You don't try to change the sky, so you don't need to try and stop the wind. The effort to stop the thought or suppress the feeling, that's just more wind.
Right. It's just more scene content, more movement.
The realization is that even the strongest mental or emotional storms are temporary conditions in the awareness, not of the awareness. The sky remains.
And that gives you, the listener, permission to just Stop struggling with the content and simply rest as the container.
Yes, as the sky.
This idea is beautifully reinforced when it's applied directly to consciousness. A thought arises. Knowing is already here.
I love that line. It emphasizes the instantaneous nature of the seer. The knowing isn't playing catch-up. It's not running after the thought trying to figure it out.
It's a prerequisite.
It is. It's the steady light that's required for the display of the thought. If the knowing wasn't already here, the thought would just appear and vanish without being perceived.
Yeah, a flash of light outside a window you aren't looking through.
Perfect analogy. The awareness is the stable platform, while the thoughts are the flashing content. And even the fastest, most overwhelming thought doesn't diminish or pollute the capacity that knows it. It simply passes through.
Okay, let's focus now on those final stanzas. They provide the poetic expression of release.
Nothing was lost. Nothing is gained.
That's the philosophical tie-in right back to the cortex statement that nothing is added, nothing is achieved.
It reinforces this idea of the inherent completeness of the seer of the sky. When we mistakenly identify with the changing content, with the wind, we feel like we gain value or identity when things go well.
And we feel devastating loss when things go poorly.
Of course. If my success is the wind, I feel buoyant when it's strong, and I feel terrified when it subsides.
But if I recognize that I am the sky, my fundamental reality is untouched by the strength or the weakness of the wind.
Your capacity to know, your fundamental nature, is inherently whole, regardless of the content passing through.
And this leads to that concluding, powerful, and utterly simple image. Only the hand opens.
It's the entire concept of release captured in a single physical action.
What exactly is the hand holding? I assume it's the mistake, the confusion.
Yeah.
It's the content we desperately cling to, believing it provides our stability.
That's it.
What does that clinging look like in daily life?
Clinging is the effort to control the scene. It manifests as grasping on to past narratives. This is who I am because of this trauma, or this is my identity because of that success.
Or grasping onto future outcomes. I must control this situation for me to be safe.
Yes. It's the desperate effort to make the wind hold still or to force the sky to be a certain color. We clutch at thoughts, desires, fears, and identities, believing they are essential to our survival or our definition of self.
So the realization of the seer-seen distinction, that moment we remember we are the knowing, it doesn't require a new effort to do something, like meditating harder or striving for peace.
No, it's the opposite. It requires the cessation of effort, the cessation of holding on to the unstable content.
The hand doesn't have to be forced open. It naturally relaxes and opens when the realization occurs.
It is the ultimate non-doing. The hand opens because the realization renders the grasping meaningless. Once you see clearly that trying to trap the wind in your fist is futile, you naturally stop trying.
The opening of the hand is the natural consequence of clarity.
It signifies the end of the struggle, the end of the war between the self and its content.
The journey through this text now pivots. It goes from this beautiful poetic imagery toward a tool that seems specifically designed to bypass the intellectualizing mind.
We now turn to the Koan.
Which is a device for direct internal investigation.
And we should remember, a Koan, and the text gives the pronunciation as K-O-H-R, A-I-N. It's not a riddle to be solved conceptually. It's not a trick question.
What is its purpose then?
Its purpose is to push the conceptual mind to its absolute limits until it simply collapses, until it gives up. And that collapse can trigger a non-conceptual realization.
So it forces the listener back into immediate experience, bypassing all the philosophical structure we've just been building.
Exactly. It's a direct pointer. So this is the Koan we have. A thought appears. Who knows it? If you say me, show me where. If you fall silent, what is still here?
This directly operationalizes the distinction between the seer and the seen. It takes that abstract realization and turns it into a very practical internal investigation.
And it's very confrontational to the ego.
It feels like it.
It's designed to be. The function of that first question is to exhaust the intellectual ego. We are conditioned to assume that there's a fixed entity, the narrative me, that is doing the thinking and the feeling and the knowing.
And this Koan challenges that definition by demanding a precise location. Show me where.
Right. So if you, the listener, start with that first path, a thought appears. Who knows it? If you say me, show me where. Why can't the me be shown? What happens when you try?
Well, when I try to locate it, I just find more thoughts, more concepts.
Precisely. You find that the me is itself a construct. It's a collection of seen content. The me you define is built from memories, which are past content.
Anticipations of the future, which
Yeah.
is future content.
And current evaluations, which is present content.
Mhm.
If you try to pin down the actual locus of knowing, you might point to the physical brain. But the brain is a physical object. It's a piece of seen biological data.
Mhm.
You might point to the stream of consciousness, but that stream is defined by the content that flows through it. You realize the conceptual me is just another thought.
It's more content.
It's more content. Therefore, it cannot be the unchanging seer. It can't be the subject, because the moment you conceptualize it, it becomes an object, something that is known.
So the search for a fixed me is inherently doomed.
Because the seeker is the very thing that is constantly changing and being observed.
That is the intellectual dead end. The Koan collapses the conceptual structure.
Yeah.
So if the me is just another thought, then who is the one noticing the thought that says me?
And that's the critical pivot. The conceptual mind, unable to locate a stable me in the field of the scene, exhausts its effort, and it falls silent.
And that silence is the doorway to the second path of inquiry.
If you fall silent, what is still here?
This immediately points you right back to the foundational awareness, the sky, the seer.
When the noise of the searching mind finally stops, what remains?
The persistence of the awareness.
Yes. It's the capacity that registered the original thought, registered the effort to search for me, registered the subsequent frustration of the search, and now it registers the silence.
The beauty of the Koan is its instantaneous nature. It doesn't lead you to a philosophical concept like the awareness is the foundation of reality.
No, it triggers an immediate nonverbal realization of that foundation. It makes the truth of what sees does not change instantly experiential, not just theoretical.
This seems like the ultimate shortcut, because it forces you to abandon the very mental machinery that caused the initial confusion in the first place.
It's an internal judo flip.
I like that.
The confusion, remember, is believing the content is the container. This Koan temporarily shuts down the content-generating apparatus, the part of the mind that produces the main narrative, by demanding an impossible conceptual answer.
And in doing so, it leaves the container, the silent knowing, undeniably present.
You're left with what was always there.
Okay, so once that moment of recognition happens, that silent recognition of the unchanging foundation, what do we do with it? How do we bridge this profound realization into the messy reality of daily life?
That's the key question. And the next section of the source material provides short, practical directives to guide exactly that application.
So we're moving now to the section titled Quotes.
Yes, which offers these distilled instructions for a kind of practical posture.
Let's hear them.
Sit as what knows. Let everything else be known. Stillness in motion. Silent recognition.
Let's take that first one. Sit as what knows, let everything else be known. That seems like a simple, immediate directive for changing one's internal posture. What does it mean to sit as what knows?
It means making a fundamental shift in your reference point. Most of us unconsciously spend our lives doing the practice of identifying with the content.
Right. We're constantly trying to use one piece of seen content like discipline, thought, or willpower to manage other seen objects, like our emotions or our habits.
Exactly. And this directive tells you to just drop that entire effort. Stop trying to manage the wind. Instead, just rest in the seer.
Rest in the capacity of awareness.
Yes. Let's use a common scenario. You receive a piece of genuinely upsetting news that triggers a wave of anger and anxiety.
Yeah.
The old mechanism is to jump into that wave, to become the anger, and then you either try to repress it or you act it out. That's identifying with the content.
So applying the quote here means, when that wave of anger appears, I don't jump in. I simply rest as the shore.
Perfect. Rest as the stable, unchanging knowing the shore and allow the wave of anger to be known.
So I acknowledge a phenomenon of anger is present without claiming ownership by saying, I am angry.
Precisely. By resting in the knowing, you create space between the awareness and the emotion, and that space is critical. It's everything.
Why is it so critical?
Because it allows the emotion, the everything else, to be known, be registered fully, but it keeps the seer untouched. The knowing is already functioning perfectly. It doesn't need your help. The practice is merely in resting as that capacity, rather than diving back into the confusion of identifying with the passing content.
This is the application of the skywind metaphor to your own nervous system.
That's a great way to put it.
This also implies a really radical form of acceptance, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because if I allow everything else to be known, that means I have to stop judging the content as good or bad. It just is.
Yes. Judgment is an act of clinging or pushing away. When you judge a thought as bad, you are trying to push the wind away, which ironically often just strengthens the thought. It gives it energy.
You're fighting with it.
You're fighting with it. But when you simply let everything be known, the good, the bad, the neutral, you stop providing the resistance that fuels the suffering. You rest as the unbiased, unchanging witness.
That brings us beautifully to the second instruction, stillness in motion. This is a profound paradox that acknowledges we live in a world of constant activity.
And this is perhaps the most practical directive for the modern listener. It acknowledges that the scene, the world of action, career, family, deadlines, traffic, it will never stop moving.
So true stillness isn't achieved by physically stopping the world. That's impossible.
It's impossible. Instead, true stillness is achieved by recognizing the unchanging stillness of the seer, of the awareness, even while the body and mind are fully engaged in motion.
The internal core remains unmoved, anchored, stable, even as the surface of experience churns.
Exactly.
How would a listener apply this during a high-stress kinetic moment, say, navigating a chaotic workday or a difficult family situation?
Let's take a stressful commute. It's often a prime example of motion and agitation. The traffic, the urgent deadline thought, the road rage from the person next to you.
That's all motion. It's content. The wind blowing fiercely.
Right. And if you are identified with the content, you become the road rage. You become the panic about being late.
So to practice stillness in motion,
Yeah.
you would anchor in the seer.
You anchor in the seer. You perform the required actions, driving, shifting, navigating, but the awareness itself remains still. You notice the agitation in the body, you notice the urgency of the thought, the noise of the horn, but you remain rooted in the knowing capacity that is registering all of it.
So the body is in motion, the thoughts are in motion, but the capacity that registers that motion is still.
Yes. And this allows you to respond intelligently to the chaos without being completely engulfed by it.
It's like being the eye of the storm. The awareness is the stable point around which the entire storm of life revolves.
Exactly. The stillness is always available. Not because the circumstances have changed, but because the foundational nature of the knowing capacity never moves. You don't need a silent room or a meditation retreat to practice this distinction.
The practice is ongoing, in every moment of experience.
Because the knowing is always present.
And finally, we have silent recognition. This seems to connect back directly to the Koan's resolution and the whole subtractive nature of clarity.
It does. The clarity of this realization is not a noisy event. It's not an intellectual boast or some loud philosophical assertion.
It's quiet.
It's quiet because the knowing does not need language or conceptualization to verify its own presence. The recognition is instant, it's nonverbal, and it's immediate. It's just a silent nod to what is already true.
Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. Think about what it takes to confirm your own existence right now. If you ask yourself, am I here? The realization that you are here happens before the words are even fully formed in your mind.
It's an instant, felt sense of presence.
That is the nature of silent recognition. It's the simple, non-effortful acknowledgement of the seer. It is the default background truth of your experience.
We've covered the entire experiential loop now, the core distinction, the poem's metaphor, the Koan's inquiry, and the practical quotes. To bring this whole deep dive full circle, we have to analyze the text's unique identity as it defines itself in the final section, the notes.
Yes, this defines what this material is not and, crucially, what it is.
Let's look at those final points. They provide a kind of meta-analysis of the entire approach.
It is not a philosophy because nothing is added. It is only the noticing of what is already true. What knows is the same in everyone, the one shared truth. Everything else differs.
Okay, that first note is perhaps the most crucial clarification in the entire text. It is not a philosophy because nothing is added. Why does the text go so far out of its way to define itself by negation?
Because philosophies, almost by definition, require you to build an elaborate conceptual structure. They require belief in systems, in tenets, or definitions of reality that have to be learned and then defended.
They add new concepts to your intellectual framework.
Which then become more content, more seen material that the mind has to manage and juggle. And this text insists on the complete opposite. If the knowing is already present and complete, then any conceptual structure you build around it is. It's redundant. It becomes more content, not the container.
If you start defining the seer with elaborate philosophical terms, you risk turning the simple, immediate experience of knowing into an intellectual object that has to be chased and acquired.
And you restart the whole cycle of confusion and seeking.
You don't need to add anything to the sky for it to be the sky. You only need to remove the confusion that you are the passing cloud.
Exactly. Which leads directly to that second note. It is only the noticing of what is already true. The entire approach is defined simply as an act of noticing.
It's active in the sense that attention is required.
But it's effortless, because the truth being noticed is immediate and inherent. The realization is experiential, not theoretical or cumulative.
So the text provides the ultimate efficiency. You cut through centuries of intellectual debate by simply noticing the foundational reality of your own perception right now.
You don't accumulate more knowing. You simply notice the knowing that has always been present.
And if we connect this all the way back to the start, this noticing of what is already true is the act of remembering.
Which is defined as seeing that mistake.
Once that fundamental mistake of identifying with content is clearly seen,
The hand opens, the searching mind falls silent, and the confusion ends. It all clicks into place.
now for the profound final points which address the universality of this realization. What knows is the same in everyone, the one shared truth. Everything else differs.
This is perhaps the most expansive and maybe the most challenging implication of the text. It declares that while the wind, our individual content, our history, our personality, our culture, our politics, is unique to each person,
The sky, the foundational capacity to know, is universal.
it is the single shared truth that exists beneath the infinite variety of human experience.
This fundamentally shifts how we view identity and connection. We use content to define ourselves and others. We identify as a specific gender or nationality or political affiliation.
And those are the elements that differ.
But the text suggests that our deepest identity, the constant unchanging awareness, is the exact same in every single person we encounter.
Just think about the implications of that for empathy and for conflict. Conflicts almost always arise from confusing our unique wind, our beliefs, our grievances, our narratives, with the universal sky.
We defend our beliefs as if they are our lifeblood.
Because we have mistaken that temporary content for our core self. We think an attack on our idea is an attack on us.
But if the seer is the same in everyone, then the awareness in you is the same as the awareness in me. The barriers we erect between people are merely the differences in the seen content.
A realization of this shared truth inherently dissolves the fundamental perceived barrier between individuals. The capacity to know is universal. It's the common ground.
The recognition of this universality provides a deep, unshakable foundation for connection that can't be threatened by differing opinions or life circumstances.
When you sit as what knows, you are sitting as what knows in everyone. The content of our lives differs infinitely, but the light that illuminates all that content is shared.
Okay, let's try to summarize the key takeaways from this incredibly concentrated deep dive. We started with the foundational structure, the absolute distinction between the seer
The unchanging capacity.
and the seen, which is all the changeable content.
We then detailed how suffering arises entirely from that fundamental mistake of identity confusion, and that clarity is achieved not through acquisition, but through the simple cessation of grasping.
Represented by that powerful metaphor of the opening hand.
We looked at the poetic images of the wind and the sky to illustrate the stability of the knowing, and we used the sharp inquiry of the Koan to short-circuit the intellectual effort that tries to locate the self in the realm of the content.
And crucially, we realize that this is not a new philosophical structure to be learned, but merely a precise set of pointers designed to highlight what is already and always true.
The silent recognition of the knowing that is universal and shared by everyone.
So you, the listener, now have specific, immediate tools: the self-check, the con questions, the directive to sit as what knows, to verify this distinction in your own moment-to-moment experience.
The goal was never to learn a new concept, but to recognize a foundational reality that is always present.
And if we build on that final, powerful point, the one shared truth, we're left with a pretty provocative thought to carry forward into your week.
If the knowing is genuinely the same in every single human being, and the barriers we experience are based only on the content that appears, what does that imply about the nature of humanity's biggest societal and political challenges?
Are these fundamental divisions that require perpetual struggle? Or are they simply different, powerful winds blowing through the exact same universal sky?
Something for you to mull over and explore through your own silent recognition.
Thank you for joining us for this unhurried deep dive into the nature of the seer and the seen.